Noah didn't say anything. He stayed silent, and Tate took that silence as confirmation of everything he had just said. His expression hardened. "You can keep yourself warm," Tate snapped. "You are a disloyal, traitorous, cheating, lying prioritizer of everyone else but me." Noah stayed silent, enraging Tate. Tate stomped his foot, a dramatic gesture that was almost childlike as his emotions overwhelmed him. "Fine, I'll just invite a different girl into my bed every night so I'm not lonely. You can sleep in the bed you've made for yourself." He pointed at Noah, his voice cracking beneath the anger. "You don't want me, you'd rather sleep alone, you'd rather have everyone else than choose me." Tate looked away, jaw clenched. "Fine." Tate looked like he was seething with jealousy, his anger barely concealing how deeply hurt he felt. "I told you years ago not to make me regret this," Tate said, his voice trembling with frustration. "Not to make me regret focusing my time, my attention, and my emotional labor on you if you had no intention of giving any of that back." He stared at Noah, his expression hardening. "I gave you so much of myself, I chose you over and over again, I showed up for you, I made you a priority, and I needed to know that I mattered to you the same way." His voice lowered, carrying more pain than anger. "But now it feels like I invested everything into someone who was never going to choose me the way I chose them." Tate explained, "I always prioritize you, your needs, your safety, your best interests over my own. Maybe I am selfish, maybe I'm possessive, maybe I'm controlling, but you don't know what it's like being on this side of everything, Noe. You grew up in a normal environment, you didn't have money, you didn't have all these expectations placed on you. Sure, you had expectations like every other kid: grow up, do well in school, get a job, and get married. But it's not the same as being born into wealth. Your decisions don't affect the lives of 500,000 employees. Your inability to have children doesn't weigh against 700 years of family expectations. The people you spend time with don't determine whether other billionaires take you seriously. Every decision I make is scrutinized. Every relationship I have reflects on my family. Every mistake has consequences that extend far beyond my own life. So maybe I am possessive, maybe I worry too much, maybe I hold on too tightly, but I've spent my entire life carrying responsibilities and expectations that most people will never have to imagine." Tate stood in the corner, 2 arms' lengths away from Noah, looking almost pitiful. "You grew up in a normal family. Most of the people around you actually see you as a person, not a bank account or an ATM. Nobody's ever wanted anything from me except money, and honestly," Tate let out a hollow laugh, his eyes dropping to the floor, "I'm lucky if they even bother to ask. Most of the time they just take. Every teacher I ever had looked at me and saw a future CEO, someone they had to stay on good terms with because they thought I might be the mayor, a senator, or the head of a Fortune 500 company 20 years down the road. They didn't treat me like everyone else. You went to class, studied, and your teachers wanted you to get good grades. I was lucky if my teachers even brought up my education when I was sitting in their office. Most teachers would give me a bad grade because they wanted me to perform extra credit on my knees, while others gave me a better grade only if I promised to talk to my father about perks and things like that. Half my teachers got me in trouble, so that when my father came down to the principal's office, they could offer a solution that would save his child's future or protect the blue legacy, and then my father would be grateful enough that the person's salary would increase or their retirement would be guaranteed. But most of them weren't interested in giving me that kind of credit, the kind you earn on a piece of paper. They were more interested in staying in my family's good graces than treating me like a student." Tate sighed, his shoulders sagging beneath a weight that seemed far older than he was. "I haven't met a single person in my entire life who sees me as a human being, except you. Everyone else sees me as something they've already made up their minds before they even know me. They put a label on me: disturbed, crazy, mentally unstable. A sad case, just another spoiled rich boy. I've never really been visible, not as a person. People see my last name before they see me. They treat being around me like they're orbiting the sun. They don't see Tate, they see the air, the fortune, the expectations. When I was 6 weeks old, one magazine called me the richest boy on the Pacific coast. 6 weeks old. They didn't know anything about me, I couldn't even hold my own head up, and somehow they already thought they knew who I was going to be. If you had the chance, Noah asked quietly, to tell people who you really are, what would you say? Tate laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. They're operating under the assumption that I can. That's the funny thing about normal people. If you want to say something, you just say it. You vent, you tell your friends, you tell your family, you can post it online if you want. When you're born into wealth, you tell the wrong person your business, and by next week it's on every grocery store magazine rack in America, and in the worst-case scenarios, it costs you a few million so it doesn't get put on every magazine rack in town, or some jogger finds you floating in the bay because you jumped from a nearby building to avoid facing ruin or scandal. Every time I start forming an opinion of my own, my social circle reminds me of my cousin Casey. He married a penniless whore they all looked down on and squandered his inheritance on her, doing God knows what. To them, Casey isn't a person. He's a cautionary tale of a spoiled rich boy who saw some fascinating piece of ripe ass and thought he could hold onto his social class by fucking beneath his class. Honestly, Tate shook his head with a weary smile. I think his friends would have respected Casey more if he died. At least then he wouldn't have been around to embarrass my family. Jesus, Noah said quietly, are the people around you socially really that heartless? Tate nodded. I've met a few wives who were absolutely awful. Their marriages were so toxic that a couple of their husbands ended up taking their own lives. Looking at what those relationships had become, it seemed like they believed death was easier than divorce. He let out a weary sigh. And I've met CEOs who treated their wives so badly that those women ran off with their gardeners just to escape. They chose a modest life over spending one more day with a man who made them miserable. Tate shook his head. The wealthy people I know are a mess. Depression, alcohol, prescription pills, drugs. Everyone's pretending everything is perfect because admitting you're miserable is seen as weakness. They smile for the cameras, then go home and fall apart behind closed doors. Money buys comfort, it doesn't buy peace. What they don't tell you, Tate said quietly, is that in my world, sooner or later, everyone feels like they have to make a choice. Either you become the kind of rich man who buries every emotion, hardens his heart, and convinces himself that power is all that matters, or you reach a point where you can't keep pretending anymore, and then your final choices result in everyone you know going to your funeral. That's what I've seen. The rich boys I grew up around usually coped in one of three ways: drugs, women, or corporate warfare. For some of them, nothing was more exhilarating or got their rocks off more than taking over someone else's company, stripping it apart and calling it a victory. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about power, about proving they could. Tate took off his shirt and turned it over in his hands. I haven't met a rich person, at least not since I was old enough to remember, who I thought was really living. Just because someone has a pulse doesn't mean they're alive, Noah. If you need pills just to get out of bed in the morning and alcohol just to fall asleep at night, that's not living. That's surviving. You're probably wondering which drug I take to get out of bed every morning. Tate smirked. I'm sure if you asked your friends from Brown, they'd all have a different answer. They've all decided they've got me figured out. He gave a short, humorless laugh. You really do have the most predictable taste in friends, Noah. Every one of them thinks they can sum up my entire life after spending 5 minutes looking at my last name. Luckily for me, I don't need drugs or alcohol, Tate said. I don't need something to help me cope. I have memory loss because of my seizures. I don't remember 90% of the last 24 years of my life. Usually, after 72 hours, everything starts disappearing. I can't even remember what we did yesterday. Seizures are a bitch, Noah. Noah sniffled, having to hear the reality of Tate's memory loss and confusion. Tate shook his head. My mom listens to everything the doctors say and treats every word like it came directly from God's mouth. But the truth is, doctors don't know shit. I had a pediatrician one time who knew what he was talking about. It's better for everyone if they don't. Sometimes I wonder if, without all the money and resources behind me, they would just medicate me until I became easier to manage. Money can buy almost anything, but it's like smoke. You reach for it and it slips right through your fingers. None of the women I've ever been with cared about me. They cared about what came with me, and honestly, it's even worse when they pretend they care. I try to keep my private life private, Tate said. Every once in a while, my mother would find out about how many women I was seeing, and she would make it sound like I was the biggest whore in Lowe's Angels. I know she meant well. I know she was probably worried about me. But when you're born into a world like mine, so many decisions are already made for you. Your future is planned, your image is managed, your choices are constantly judged. Maybe sex became the one thing in my life where I felt like I had control. And yet your friends probably just think I'm a sex addict. But I don't hurt women, no, I don't lie to them. I don't manipulate them or lure them into my bed with promises of marriage or commitment just to get what I want. The women I've been with know exactly who I am. Their parents know, their mothers know, even the women who talk about me online know the truth. They can criticize my choices, but they can't say I deceived them. Noah nodded. I hid in the girls' bathroom once when I was 13, Tate explained. He looked away for a moment, almost like he was remembering a version of himself that nobody else had ever seen. It was kind of like when you were 17 and you hid in the girls' bathroom to escape the bullies, Tate said quietly. Except my situation was different. You were trying to get away from people who wanted to hurt you. I was trying to get away from people who wouldn't stop touching me. Girls would corner me in the hallway. They would grab at me, pull at my clothes, try to get my attention, and say things about me like I wasn't even standing there. They acted like because I was rich, because I had a certain last name, because they thought they knew who I wasn't a real person anymore. The things they would say about me, honestly, Noah, there wasn't much difference between me and a piece of poultry hanging in a meat market. I felt like something people looked at, commented on, and wanted to claim, not someone they respected. Nobody cared if I was uncomfortable. Nobody asked if I was okay. They just saw the image they had created in their heads and treated me like I was supposed to accept it. The girls' bathroom was the only place I could think of where nobody would follow me. It was the one place where, for a few minutes, I could just be alone. Tate was quiet before continuing. The only nice girl I've ever slept with was Adriana. I met her when I was 14. She was the only girl who never coerced or manipulated me into bed. She never acted as if I owed her something because of who I was. She actually treated me like a person. Adriana grew up in a rich home too, as it turned out, so maybe she understood some things other people didn't. Her family had their own complicated history. Her father had been with his sister-in-law, which resulted in a pregnancy and a scandal within the family. Once the baby was born, the mother gave the child to her older sister, the wife of the man she had been involved with, to raise. The child was then brought up within the family under a different story, all to prevent the scandal from becoming public. Imagine Christmas dinners in that house. Tate laughed. Noah tried not to laugh, but he failed. Tate nodded slowly, a faint smile crossing his face as he thought about Adriana. Adriana and I always made a joke that her entire life sounded like something out of a crime documentary, Tate said. Ironically, Adriana's childhood is identical to Ted Bundy's, especially down to who her mother was or wasn't. We joked not because of who she was, but because the circumstances were so strange that if you heard them without knowing her, you probably wouldn't believe them. He shook his head, almost amused by the absurdity of it. I mean, finding out your mother is actually your aunt and your aunt is the person who raised you is a pretty unusual situation. Imagine growing up with that kind of family secret sitting in the background of your entire life. Imagine every holiday, every family gathering, every conversation having that unspoken history behind it. Tate leaned back, letting out a quiet laugh. Adriana was able to joke about it because that's how she coped. Sometimes when something is so unbelievable, the only thing you can do is laugh. His expression changed slightly, becoming more serious. People ask questions about me all the time, questions they would never ask someone else. When I lost my V card, how many girls I've been with, if I've ever been in love, who I've dated, things that are incredibly personal. He looked down. I don't like talking about my private life because it doesn't matter what I say. Everyone in Los Angeles, regardless of their age, already has their own opinions about me. He gave a small, bitter laugh. I could write an autobiography. I could put every truth, every detail, every moment of my life into a book, and people still wouldn't care what it actually said. They'd believe whatever version of me makes them comfortable, happy, and safe. People don't want the truth if the truth doesn't match the story they've already created. Tate looked at Noah. That's what you don't understand. You and your friends have already decided who I am. You've created this person in your heads and judged him, and the strangest part is, I've never even talked about any of this with you. Noah reached out and took Tate's hand. For a moment, Tate didn't say anything. He stared down at their hands, his expression quieter than before, like he was trying to find the right words. When you join a rich family, they teach you silence, Tate finally said. You learn very young that you don't talk about certain things, family secrets, private business ventures, confidential information that could make or break relationships, social relationships, industrial relationships, business relationships. He looked away. One careless sentence can cost millions of dollars. You can destroy partnerships. You can expose information about clients or investors. You can damage someone's reputation, and everyone expects you to understand that before you're even old enough to understand why. Tate squeezed Noah's hand slightly. I don't have any secrets, Noah, not really. He gave a small tired laugh. But I could write a book about the secrets of the people around me, the things I've heard, the things I've seen, the things wealthy families spend generations trying to keep hidden. He shook his head. But I won't, because that's the rule. You protect the circle you're born into even when the circle doesn't always protect you. Tate's expression became more serious. Most of the time, what actually worries me isn't even the gossip or the secrets. It's the family business. It's figuring out how I'm supposed to carry all of this without letting everyone down. He paused. And then there's the pressure from my own class, the expectations, the traditions. His face tightened. Everyone expects me to have as many children as possible, to continue the family line, to produce the next generation like that's my only purpose. Tate grimaced. Sometimes I feel like they don't see me as a person, they see me as a responsibility that needs to be fulfilled. Adriana offered that I could use her name as the person I lost my virginity to, Tate said quietly. She said that way we both could have something that was just mine and hers. He looked at Noah. If you give people a story, sometimes you can have a little control over your own life. People are going to talk either way. They're going to create their own version of you, so sometimes it's easier to give them something simple to hold on to. Tate gave a small shrug. The whole high school thinks I lost my virginity when I was 14 to Adriana. And honestly, I don't really care what they believe anymore. The truth is mine, they don't own it. He looked down for a moment. And I don't care about proving anything. I'm not a man because I sleep with hundreds of women. I'm not more important because people want to attach some ridiculous image of masculinity to me. Tate let out a humorless laugh. Honestly, Noah, the most terrifying thing imaginable is becoming what rich people think a man is supposed to be. Noah frowned slightly. What does that even mean? Tate looked at him. That's what people expect rich men to be, Tate said. They want us to be strong, alpha, perfectly confident, muscular, beautifully sculpted, an overachiever, a conqueror, a man who walks into a room and everyone notices him. He gave a small bitter smile. They want someone with undeniable charisma, someone who can charm anyone, who always knows what to say, who has endless confidence and somehow never struggles with anything. Tate looked away. They want the image of a man who has everything. Success, power, money, attention, women, the kind of person everyone either wants to be or wants to be around. He paused. But behind closed doors, a lot of those men are far more similar than people realize. His voice lowered. Behind the image, behind the suits, the companies, the parties, and the confidence, they're often carrying the same fears, the same loneliness, the same insecurities as everyone else. Tate sighed. That's what rich men think a real man is, Tate said. Someone who never shows weakness, someone who destroys everything in his way, who treats people like they're disposable, who confuses power with strength. He shook his head. That's the version of a man they respect, and that's the part that scares me. The difference is they just have more people depending on them to pretend they don't. When their wives aren't around and the police don't care, these rich assholes more resemble a man being handcuffed and put into the back of a police car rather than the James Bond facade they want to deceive people with. Noah blinked. I'm too rich and too connected for most people to target me, Tate said quietly, but I've known people who weren't so lucky. He tightened his arms around Noah, pulling him closer. Luckily, you have me to keep an eye on you, so men like Mark don't take advantage of your cute blonde ass. Noah looked at him and Tate gave a faint smile before his expression turned serious. People think I use you for your body heat. They think I hold on to you because it makes me feel better about myself while I go out and make billions off the work of people who don't get paid enough. He paused. And the business part, maybe they're not completely wrong. Tate looked down at Noah. But if all I wanted was body heat, I could find anyone. I wouldn't have to break through walls just to get close to someone. Hell, someone would probably pay me to break down their door and leave afterward. He shook his head. But that's not what I want. I don't want just physical intimacy. I mean, yes, it helps. It gives me something I can control when everything else in my life feels impossible to control. His voice softened. But it's not closeness. Those people don't know me. Tate sighed. I think the worst girl I was ever with was Madison. Every time I saw her, she wanted something: cash, money, tickets, coupons, anything she could get from me. He laughed quietly. I had to hide my golden debit card in my shoe because I was afraid she'd go searching for it. Every time I saw her, she would grope my body, trying to find my pocket where my wallet was hidden. If I put a mousetrap in my pocket to keep her from touching my credit card, her fingers would have been swollen 24/7. His expression hardened. And she had the audacity to want to be my girlfriend, not because she wanted me as a person, she wanted the social validation of being my girlfriend. He looked away. She never bought me a gift, not once. Tate was quiet for a moment. All these women boasted how they were going to use me, so I used them first. That's how I justified it. It was self-defense. He looked back at Noah. Maybe you think that's terrible, maybe you're right. But when you've spent your entire life believing people want to consume you, like you're not a person, just something valuable they can take from you, start protecting yourself before they get the chance. His voice dropped. You either learn to use people first or you get used instead. Tate exhaled. That's what it feels like to be rich. When I brought you home that first night, Tate said, his voice quieter, I was terrified you were going to use me for everything you could get. You wouldn't have been the first person. I've let people sleep in my room before who treated me like a dish towel, something they could use whenever they needed it and throw aside afterward. Metaphorically speaking, of course. He gave a small laugh. Or financially, I suppose. I was pleasantly surprised you didn't steal my wallet. Noah smiled slightly. I remember waking up one morning and realizing you weren't a liability. You weren't someone I had to protect myself from. Tate brushed his fingers through Noah's hair. Maybe it took a few months before I fully understood that. He looked down at him. I never used you, Noah, not for money, favors, or some hidden agenda. You just stayed. Tate was quiet for a moment before continuing. When I mentioned years ago that my money was always available to you, I wasn't doing it to manipulate you. I wasn't trying to control or keep you around. His hand gently rested against Noah's hair. I said it because I only give money to people I love. Tate sighed. But rich people have a way of twisting things. They see our platonic affection and immediately turn it into something else. They call it unnatural, creepy, or even predatory because of the difference in our financial situations. He looked at Noah seriously. But that's not what this is. I don't want to sleep with you in any way other than what we've always done. I don't want to own you. I don't want to buy your loyalty. His voice softened. I just wanted you to know that you had someone who would take care of you. Tate kept running his fingers through Noah's hair, the gentle motion almost at odds with the pain in his voice. All the loyalty, love, and availability I offer you, or anyone else, I used to think it was enough. He stared out the window, still holding onto Noah, his arms wrapped around him as if letting go meant admitting defeat. But it's not. His voice became quieter. And it hasn't been for 6 years, at least not for you, and for other people, it never has been. Noah looked up at him, his expression tightening. Tate. But Tate shook his head slightly, not wanting to be interrupted. I risked everything a boy like me in the world I live in has. I made an alliance with someone so unsuitable, that's what my world calls you. His eyes lowered to Noah. But you know that's not what I call you. Noah frowned. Don't say that, don't talk about me like I'm some mistake you made. Tate gave a tired smile. So what did I get out of it? He paused. Good memories, that's it. Noah reached for his hand. That's not nothing. Tate looked away. It's all I have. No, Noah said softly, it's not all you have me. Tate's expression flickered, but the sadness remained. I'm left with arrested development, seizures, depression, and eventually I'll probably start eating because I can't handle anything else and I'll blow up like a balloon. Noah's face softened. Tate, I don't love you because you're perfect. I don't care about your money, your name, or what people think you're supposed to be. Tate looked down. Everyone keeps telling me it's not your fault that I don't make you happy, so maybe I should just let you go. Noah shook his head. You're deciding for both of us again. Tate went quiet. Tate kept running his fingers through Noah's hair, the gentle motion almost at odds with the pain in his voice. All the loyalty, love, and availability I offer you, or anyone else, I used to think it was enough. He stared out the window, still holding onto Noah, his arms wrapped around him as if letting go meant admitting defeat. But it's not. His voice became quieter. And it hasn't been for 6 years, at least not for you and for other people, it never has been. Noah looked up at him, his expression tightening. Tate. But Tate shook his head slightly, not wanting to be interrupted. I risked everything a boy like me in the world I live in has. I made an alliance with someone so unsuitable, that's what my world calls you. His eyes lowered to Noah. But you know that's not what I call you. Noah frowned. Don't say that, I'm not some mistake you made. Tate gave a tired smile. So what did I get out of it? He paused. Good memories, that's it. Noah reached for his hand. That's not nothing. Tate looked away. It's all I have, but I can't even remember most of them anymore. No, Noah said softly, it's not all you have me. Tate's expression flickered, but the sadness remained. Yeah, a boy who hides behind a locked door and flinches every time I touch him. That's what I'm left with because my memories are almost gone. I'm left with arrested development, seizures, depression. And eventually I'll probably start eating because I can't handle anything else and I'll blow up like a balloon. Noah's face softened. Tate, I don't love you because you're perfect. I don't care about your money, your name, or what people think you're supposed to be. Tate looked down. Everyone keeps telling me it's not your fault that I don't make you happy, so maybe I should just let you go. Noah shook his head. You're deciding for both of us again. Tate went quiet. You think leaving is the only way to stop hurting me, but you never ask me what I want. Tate took a shaky breath. Let me get on with my life so I can make myself as miserable as every other rich man seems to make himself. No, Noah whispered, I don't want that for you. Tate looked at him. You can find another friend, another companion, someone else who fits into your life better. Noah held onto his hand. Tate looked away. Maybe you can just leave me behind. Tate sniffled. The house is yours, Tate said quietly. I bought it because I wanted to make you happy. I hope it did, even if it was only for a short period of time. Noah felt the weight of Tate's body sink into his shoulder, the tension slowly leaving him. He could tell Tate was finally letting go not just of the house but of the fight, the expectations, and the hurt he had been carrying. Don't feel guilty, Noah, Tate whispered. If you want a different life, you have every right to have one. For once, there was no anger in his voice, no accusation, no attempt to hold on through guilt, only a painful kind of acceptance. Tate pulled back slightly, kissed Noah gently on the cheek, and gave him a small, sad smile. If you ever need help, don't waste a second wondering if you should call, he said, just call. Tate slowly pulled his arms away from Noah's body, the warmth between them disappearing. I think I'll start packing, Tate said softly. If it's okay with you, I'll stay one more night and leave in the morning before you wake up. He hesitated, looking around the room as if trying to memorize the last pieces of a life he was leaving behind. If I miss anything or forget something, just give it to Talia. I'm sure I'll run into her at some point. The words were simple, but Noah could hear everything Tate wasn't saying, the sadness, the resignation, and the effort it took to let go. Tate looked at Noah for a long moment before speaking. You need time to move on and make something for yourself, Tate said quietly. You need a life that isn't built around me. His voice softened, the usual defensiveness gone. You can still have Sunday dinners with family and friends without me, at least for the next 6 months if you want. I usually visit my mother on Mondays, but other than that, the other 6 days will be yours. Noah stared at him, surprised by the offer. Tate wasn't demanding a place in his life anymore. He was giving him space while still leaving a small piece of their connection intact. For the first time in a long while, Tate wasn't asking Noah to choose him. He was telling Noah he wanted him to be happy. Noah stood up. Tate. But Tate was already walking away. He went upstairs, each step heavier than the last. A moment later, his bedroom door closed. Noah remained downstairs, staring at the staircase, realizing that for the first time in years, Tate wasn't pushing him away out of anger. He was doing it because he genuinely believed he was giving Noah what the blonde really wanted. Noah retired to his bedroom at 9 o'clock that evening. For a while, he sat in the quiet, listening to the unfamiliar sounds coming from downstairs. Tate was still moving around, tinkering with things, opening drawers and shifting items from place to place. Every so often, Noah heard another cabinet close or something being set down. He assumed Tate was going through the house, collecting the things that belonged to him, the 1/3 of the home and the possessions that carried the mark of the hazel-eyed man who had filled so much of Noah's life. Noah didn't go downstairs. He knew Tate needed the space. Whatever Tate couldn't take with him in the morning, Noah was certain he would handle. Tate had always been someone who planned ahead. Noah wouldn't have been surprised if he had already arranged for movers to come by and finish the rest of the job. The thought hurt more than Noah expected. Soon the house that had once been filled with Tate's footsteps, his voice, his laughter and his constant presence would become quiet. Noah lay in the quiet of his bedroom, reflecting on the past 6 years with Tate. All the pain they had caused each other, all the arguments, the resentment, and the moments where they had both felt abandoned seemed to trace back to one painful truth: they didn't understand each other. They had loved each other deeply, but they had never learned how to truly communicate. At least, Noah knew that was where he had failed. He had been afraid. He had been afraid of Tate's homophobia and of what it might mean for their relationship. He had been afraid that telling Tate the truth about himself would change everything, not only between them but between Tate and his parents as well. Noah didn't want things to become uncomfortable or divided. He didn't want anyone forced to choose sides. Deep down, Noah knew that if there was ever an argument between him and Tate, most of the people in their lives, his friends and even Tate's parents, would likely support Noah, even if Noah was the one in the wrong. And that was the last thing Noah wanted. He didn't want Tate to feel like everyone had chosen Noah over him. He didn't want Tate to feel outnumbered, rejected, or betrayed by the people who were supposed to love him. So Noah stayed silent. He kept a part of himself hidden from Tate, believing that silence was protecting their relationship. But now, lying alone in the room, Noah wondered if that silence had only created the distance that eventually pulled them apart. Noah couldn't sleep. He knew the moment he closed his eyes, morning would come and Tate would be gone. The thought sat heavily in his chest. For 6 years, waking up had meant Tate was there, somewhere in the same house, under the same roof, a constant presence woven into the rhythm of Noah's life. Now he had to face the possibility that tomorrow would be the beginning of something completely different. A part of Noah feared that the next 50 years would look the same. Waking up alone, reaching across an empty space and remembering the person who was no longer there. He knew, eventually, he might meet someone else. Life would continue. He might find another person to share his days with, another relationship, another kind of happiness. But Noah couldn't imagine anyone making him feel the way Tate had. No matter how complicated they were, no matter how much pain they had caused each other, Tate had been the person who made Noah feel the most alive. And the hardest part was knowing that loving someone wasn't always enough to make two people understand each other. Noah's heart was beating so hard it felt like it was trying to escape his chest. Thump, thump, thump. The pounding was so intense that his entire chest felt tight, his heartbeat echoing through his body until his ribs seemed to ache. He wondered if this was what panic felt like, the physical weight of knowing that something precious was slipping away. His thoughts drifted to Tate. Was Tate lying awake too? Was he in his own warm bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Noah was doing at that exact moment? Was he feeling the same ache, the same uncertainty, the same fear of waking up to a life that looked completely different? Noah tossed and turned, unable to find comfort in the empty space around him. Finally, he gave up. He climbed out of bed, grabbed a pillow and a blanket, and quietly made his way downstairs. Noah knew himself well enough to understand why he was doing it. If he stayed on the same floor as Tate, only one door away, separated by a hallway and a few steps, he knew himself. Eventually, the loneliness would become too much. he would get up, walk down the hall, and end up standing outside Tate's door. And he didn't trust himself not to knock. So Noah chose the easier option. Distance. They needed distance. Because if Noah didn't give Tate the space he was asking for, Tate would leave in the morning with the feeling that nothing had changed. Whatever fragile thread still connected them would finally snap, and any chance of finding their way back to something, whatever that something might become, would disappear with him. The hours dragged on. Midnight chimed from the grandfather clock in the living room, the sound echoing through the quiet house. Noah lay curled up on the lumpy couch, his pillow and blanket doing little to make the temporary bed feel like home. He had heard the sounds from the bathroom they had shared for years and finally stopped. The running water, the small movements, the familiar noises of Tate getting ready for bed, all of it had eventually faded into silence. Then Noah heard Tate's bedroom door close. Tate had gone to sleep in his own room. His own bed. His own space. Noah stared up at the ceiling, trying to convince himself that Tate was probably already asleep. Maybe he had finally found some peace after such an exhausting day. Maybe his breathing had slowed, his mind had quieted, and he wasn't lying awake thinking about everything they had lost. But Noah couldn't stop wondering. Was Tate really asleep? Or was he lying there too, staring into the darkness, feeling the same ache that Noah felt? The house had never felt so large. For years, every corner had carried pieces of them, their routines, their arguments, their laughter, their lives intertwined. Now, for the first time, the distance between two rooms felt like an entire world. Noah's questions about Tate stopped mattering the moment he heard the bedroom door open. His eyes opened immediately. In the dimness of the house, he saw a shadow move across the hallway upstairs. His heart tightened as he recognized the familiar shape of Tate making his way toward the staircase. Slowly, quietly, Tate descended the steps. Noah stayed still on the couch, barely breathing. He watched as Tate walked past the living room. Tate must have seen him there. He had to have noticed Noah curled up on the lumpy couch with a pillow and blanket, choosing the living room over the bedroom they once shared. But Tate didn't stop. He didn't turn around. He didn't say his name. He simply kept walking. Noah listened as Tate crossed toward the garage. A moment later, the garage light flicked on, casting a faint glow through the house. Then came the sound of the garage side door opening and closing. Tate was gone from sight. Noah lay there in the silence, wondering what Tate was doing out there in the middle of the night, and why, after everything they had said to each other, neither of them had been brave enough to cross the distance between them. Noah lay motionless on the couch, listening to the faint sounds coming from the garage. At first he thought Tate was simply moving things around, but then he heard something else. A voice. Tate was talking on the telephone. The walls and distance made the words difficult to understand. Most of what Tate said was muffled, just a low murmur carried through the quiet house. Noah strained to listen, not because he wanted to invade Tate's privacy, but because every sound Tate made still pulled at his attention. It didn't sound like Tate was talking to anyone in his family. There was no familiar tone of someone speaking with his parents or relatives. Whoever was on the other end of the call, Tate sounded serious and focused. Then Noah caught a few words. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. And something about someone coming to Noah's house. That was all he could make out. The rest disappeared into the walls. Noah stared toward the closed garage door, his mind racing with possibilities. Was Tate arranging for help? Was someone coming to move the rest of his things? Had Tate already planned the final steps of leaving? He wanted to know. He wanted to walk out there and ask. But Noah stayed where he was. For once, he respected the distance Tate had asked for, even if every part of him was desperate to understand what was happening. It sounded like Tate made 2 calls. Noah remained still on the couch, listening as carefully as he could without meaning to. The first call ended after several quiet minutes, Tate's voice fading until the garage fell silent again. Then the phone rang, or perhaps Tate made another call. The second conversation sounded different. Noah could still barely make out the words through the walls, but he caught a few fragments. Something about an installation. Something about a bill. That was all he could understand. The rest was lost beneath the distance between them. Noah stared into the darkness, his mind trying to piece together the little information he had. Was Tate arranging things for his move? Was he setting up something for his new life? Was he making sure everything was taken care of before he left in the morning? The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing. For years, Noah had known Tate's moods, his habits, the smallest changes in his voice. But tonight, standing on opposite sides of the same house, Tate felt like a stranger. And Noah hated that he had no idea what was happening in the life of the person who had once been the center of his own. The second call ended about 10 minutes later. For a moment the house went quiet again. Then Noah heard movement coming from the garage. Tate was searching for something. The faint sounds carried through the walls, the opening of drawers, the shifting of items on shelves, boxes being moved, and things being carefully sorted through. It wasn't the careless noise of someone simply looking around. Tate sounded focused, almost methodical. Noah lay there on the couch, staring into the darkness. What was he looking for? The question immediately pulled his mind in a dozen directions. Was it something he needed before leaving in the morning, something important he had forgotten, something connected to the calls he had just made? Or was Tate searching for one last piece of himself in a house that had held so much of their shared life? Noah wanted to get up, he wanted to walk into the garage and ask him. But he stayed still. Whatever Tate was doing, whatever plans he was quietly making, Noah knew he had to let him have this moment. Even if it hurts not knowing. Noah had almost drifted off on the couch when a sudden noise broke through the quiet. A box had fallen in the garage. It wasn't a loud crash, but in the stillness of the house it was enough to make Noah sit up immediately. A series of small clanking sounds followed as something scattered across the floor. It sounded like a small box of tools, or something similar, had slipped from Tate's hands, sending its contents rolling in every direction. Noah stared toward the garage door, fully awake now. For a moment, he considered getting up to help. It was instinctive. For 6 years, whenever Tate needed something, Noah had been there. If Tate dropped something, struggled with something, or needed help, Noah's first reaction had always been to go to him. But tonight was different. Tonight, they were trying to learn how to exist apart. So Noah stayed where he was, listening as Tate quietly gathered everything back up. Even from another room, Noah could picture him, the way he would kneel down, muttering under his breath, collecting each piece with that stubborn determination Noah knew so well. The distance between them was only a few rooms. But tonight it felt impossible to cross. Noah heard Tate swear under his breath. "Fuck it." The quiet frustration in Tate's voice carried through the house. Noah could hear him moving around on the garage floor, crawling around as he picked up whatever had spilled from the small box. From the sound of it, the contents were probably tiny metal pieces, screws, nails, bolts, or some other collection of things that could scatter everywhere the moment the box hit the ground. For several minutes, the only sounds were Tate moving around and the faint clinking of metal being gathered back together. Then everything went quiet. A moment later, the garage door opened and Tate stepped back inside. Noah listened as he shut the garage door carefully and locked it. Tate moved through the house with the same quiet caution, checking the front door next. Noah heard the deadbolt slide into place, the locks clicking as Tate secured the house one last time. Then came the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Noah looked toward the dark hallway as Tate disappeared upstairs, carrying several small boxes in his arms. He didn't know what was inside them. He didn't know what Tate had been searching for all night. But watching Tate quietly prepare to leave made something inside Noah ache. Even now, even after everything, Tate was still taking care of the house before he walked away from it. Noah could see the faint movement of Tate's shadow as he climbed the stairs. He could hear each step. Tate wasn't wearing shoes or socks. His bare feet moved quietly across the carpet and then over the harder surface of the upstairs hallway. There was something strangely familiar about the sound, something that reminded Noah of all the ordinary moments they had shared, the ones he never thought he would miss. A door opened upstairs. The hinges gave a small, familiar squeak. Noah immediately knew which room it was. His room. Tate had promised months ago that he would oil those hinges. It was one of those small things that had been mentioned and forgotten, something that seemed unimportant at the time. But now, in the middle of the night on the eve of leaving, Tate was finally fixing them. Noah listened as the squeaking stopped. For all his flaws, Tate could be difficult. He could be stubborn, sharp, and sometimes hurtful, whether he meant to be or not. There were moments when Noah had wondered if Tate understood how much his words and actions affected him. But this was strangely sweet. Because even while preparing to leave, Tate was still taking care of the little things. He was still fixing something in Noah's home. Still keeping a promise. Noah lay there quietly, feeling the familiar ache in his chest return. That was the hardest thing about Tate. Even when he hurt Noah, he was also the person who remembered the tiny details. The person who showed love in ways that were easy to overlook until the moment they were gone. Tate was in Noah's room. From the couch downstairs, Noah could see a faint glow spilling into the upstairs hallway, the reflection of the lamp in his bedroom. Tate must have turned it on. He stayed in there for at least 3 minutes. Noah didn't know what he was doing. He couldn't hear anything clearly, only the quiet presence of Tate being in a room that had once belonged to both of them in every way except officially. Then Tate stepped back out. Noah waited for the sound of the door. He expected silence. After all, Tate had just fixed the hinges. But then he heard it. The squeak. Noah's brow furrowed. The hinges still squeaked. If Tate had gone into his room to oil them, why were they making the same sound as before? Had Tate not actually fixed them? Or had he gone into Noah's room for another reason entirely? The questions immediately returned. Why was Tate in Noah's room? What had he been doing for those 3 minutes? Noah stared toward the ceiling, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to believe Tate had simply been keeping his promise, doing one last thoughtful thing before leaving. But another part of him couldn't ignore the strange timing, the late-night phone calls, the boxes, the garage, and now this. Tate was leaving in the morning. So why did it feel like he was still trying to take care of a place he wouldn't be living in anymore? An idea slowly came to Noah. Maybe Tate hadn't been fixing the hinges after all. Maybe he had been leaving something behind. It made sense. Perhaps Tate had gone into Noah's room to place instructions, owner's manuals, or information about things around the house that he had always taken care of. Small details Noah might not know about because Tate had handled them for years. Maybe it was a list of things that needed maintenance, reminders about appliances, or notes about where certain items were kept. Things Tate was responsible for. Things Tate wanted Noah to know before he left. The thought softened something in Noah's chest. That sounded like Tate. Even when he was walking away, he would want to make sure Noah wasn't left struggling. He would want to leave things organized, make sure everything had a place, and make sure the house continued running the way it always had. Noah stared toward the ceiling, listening as Tate's footsteps moved farther away. Maybe that was what hurt the most. Tate was leaving, but he was still thinking about Noah. Still taking care of him in the only way he knew how. Tate returned to his own room and closed the door. Noah listened as the familiar sounds followed, the quiet movement of someone settling into bed, the slight shift of the mattress beneath Tate's weight. Tate's mattress had barely been used, and it still made that new, almost factory-like sound whenever someone sat down or moved across it. A sound Noah had noticed before. A sound he never thought he would miss. Noah turned over on the couch, pulling the blanket closer and trying to force himself to sleep. But the house was silent. Not peaceful. Silent. It felt as still as a cemetery. There were no birds outside, no footsteps overhead, no familiar sounds of Tate moving through the house, no signs of another person sharing the space with him. Nothing. Noah felt ridiculous. This was his house. His home. He had every right to sleep in his own bedroom, in his own bed. But instead, he was lying on a couch like he was the one who didn't belong there. The truth was, Noah wasn't avoiding the bedroom because of the room itself. He was avoiding the possibility of seeing Tate. Because he knew himself. His determination to give Tate space was fragile, thin as glass. If he walked upstairs, if he stood outside Tate's door, if he saw him lying there alone, Noah wasn't sure he would have the strength to keep the distance they both needed. So he stayed downstairs. On the uncomfortable couch. pretending that this was easier than admitting he didn't want to be apart from Tate at all. In every young man's life, there comes a decision that changes the course of his future. Sometimes it is a relationship, sometimes it is a career choice, a risk taken, or a path chosen when another one was waiting. For years, I believed Tate's defining moment was the decision he made when he chose to attend Brown University instead of Princeton. It seemed obvious to me. That choice shaped the people he met, the experiences he had, and ultimately the life he built. But years later, Tate told me I was wrong. He said his life had two defining moments. The first was when he commissioned a painting of me and hung it in his childhood home. At the time, I didn't understand how significant that was. To me, it was just a painting, a beautiful gesture, but still only an object. To Tate, it was something much larger. It was a statement. It was he placing me and what I meant to him somewhere permanent, somewhere his family, his past, and everyone who had known him his entire life could see. The second defining moment, he told me, hadn't happened yet. And I never asked him what he thought it would be. Maybe because part of me was afraid of the answer. Maybe because I already knew that whatever it was, it would change everything. Years later, Tate asked me what the most important choice I had ever made was. If you asked my friends, they would all probably give different answers. Susie would probably say it was my 18th birthday. Andrew would probably come up with some ridiculous answer, something completely random but somehow very Andrew, like the time I got into Brown or some other moment he decided was life-changing. Uncle Joey would probably say it was the day I became part of the Blue family, the moment I stopped being a guest and became someone who belonged. And maybe some people would say it was the first night I ever stayed at Tate's house, lying there in that ridiculous sleeping bag, not knowing that one decision would eventually change the entire direction of my life. But they would all be wrong. It wasn't any of those things. The most important choice I ever made wasn't a single dramatic moment that everyone else could see. It was something quieter, something only I knew. It was the choice that changed not just where I was going, but who I became. During our short time on this planet, we make decisions that define us. Some choices straighten out the course of our lives, others derail us. Some choices build our futures while others break them, and sometimes the choices we make carry consequences we never imagined. The most important decision I ever made was where I chose to sleep in my own house that night. People always say, if you knew what would happen later, if you knew how one choice would create a ripple effect through your entire life, would you make the same decision? I've heard married people answer that question many different ways. Some would say that if they had known how things would turn out, they never would have married that person. Others would say they would have been a better spouse or a better parent if they had understood what was coming. Everyone has moments they wish they could go back and change. But when I asked myself that question, if I had known what my choices would cost Tate and me, and more importantly, who those choices would cost, I wondered if I would have chosen differently. I don't think I would have. At least that's what I tell myself. But the truth is, I was never the person who had to live with the consequences of my decisions. I wasn't the one who paid the price. Every domino stands beside another, waiting for the smallest force to set it in motion. There's a rule in science: every action has a reaction. One moment can trigger another. One decision can open a door that leads to 100 more choices. An event, a conversation, or a single choice can become the turning point that shapes an entire life. My choice was like pushing the first domino. At first it seemed insignificant, almost meaningless. But once that first piece moved, it started a chain reaction. One domino fell into the next, then the next, creating a ripple effect that couldn't be stopped. And maybe the most tragic part wasn't that I made the choice. It wasn't even that the choice changed my life. The most tragic part was that, at the time, I didn't even know I had pushed the first domino. I remembered high school, my junior year. There was a poem I read back then that stayed with me long after I had forgotten most of the others. One line in particular never left my mind. Nothing is more dangerous than an abandoned friend, but nothing is more deadly than a provoked rival. At the time, I didn't understand why those words affected me so much. Years later I would. Because the people who know us best are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. A stranger can wound you, but someone who once stood beside you knows exactly where your heart is exposed. And sometimes the greatest tragedies don't come from enemies. They come from two people who cared about each other, who hurt each other, and who slowly became something neither of them ever intended to become. It was 1 in the morning, and I still couldn't sleep. I hadn't drifted off for even a moment. Every attempt had failed. I tossed and turned on the couch, trying to find a position that felt comfortable, but my body refused to settle. It was as if it was carrying every emotion I was trying not to feel. The sadness. The fear. The uncertainty. I wondered what Tate was feeling right now. Was he sleeping peacefully upstairs, already looking ahead to the next chapter of his life? Was he lying there thinking about the future he was about to begin, the life waiting for him outside these walls? Or was he awake too? Was he staring into the darkness, wondering if I was asleep? Was he thinking about me the same way I was thinking about him? The strangest part was that we were only separated by a floor and a few rooms, yet it felt like we were worlds apart. For 6 years, Tate had been the person I could reach for whenever I needed him. Now I was lying on a couch in my own house, wondering if he was missing me from the room above. The primary reason I couldn't sleep was simpler than I wanted to admit. I was used to Tate being there. Not just in the room. On me. For years, he had slept draped over me like some oversized fleece blanket, warm, heavy, and impossible to ignore. A hazel-eyed, jealous, possessive blanket who somehow made it impossible to feel alone. I had gotten used to the weight of him, the sound of his breathing, the way he would unconsciously move closer during the night as if, even asleep, he needed to know I was still there. My body had memorized him. And now, without him, the couch felt cold and unfamiliar. I hated admitting it, but I couldn't sleep without Tate. The truth was, I hadn't slept well for weeks. Not since I had sent him to his own bedroom after what happened with Mark, after Tate's anger had crossed a line and he had hurt someone. After the punching, the violence, the moment when Noah no longer knew how to reconcile the person he loved with the person standing in front of him. I told myself that putting distance between us was the right thing to do. That it was necessary. That was a boundary. But my body didn't understand boundaries. It only understood that the person who had been beside me every night for 6 years was suddenly gone. And lying there alone, staring into the darkness, I wondered if Tate missed me too, or if he was already learning how to sleep without me. I told myself that if Tate wanted me upstairs in his bed, underneath him the way we used to sleep, he would have asked. He would have invited me. Or, knowing Tate, he wouldn't have waited for an invitation at all. He would already be downstairs, curled up beside me, draped over me on the couch like he always did. He wouldn't be sleeping upstairs if he wanted me there. But then I remembered who Tate was when it mattered. Tate would put my needs before his own if he believed being close to me would confuse me, hurt me, or make things harder. Even if he wanted that comfort, even if he missed me, he would hold himself back if he thought it was the right thing to do. That was Tate. Stubborn, complicated, sometimes impossible. But he cared. And suddenly I understood. If I was going to get any sleep that night, I couldn't wait for Tate to make the first move. I had to be the one to decide. I had to be the one to cross the distance. My heart was pounding out of my chest like Bugs Bunny doing his famous thump, thump, thump. I folded up the blanket and placed the pillow back on the couch, trying to make it look as if no one had been sleeping there. As if I hadn't spent the night hiding from a reality I wasn't ready to accept. Then I stood up. Slowly, carefully, I walked upstairs. I tried not to make a sound. Every step felt like a risk. The slightest creak of the stairs or the floorboards could announce my presence before I was ready. I moved through the house quietly, almost like I was a stranger in my own home. When I reached the second floor, I stepped into the hallway. It was almost completely dark. That didn't surprise me. Tate liked darkness when he slept alone. He always had. But when we shared a bedroom, the room had been completely black, no lamps, no television, no outside light slipping through the curtains. Tate was very particular about sleeping in the dark. It was one of those small things I knew about him without thinking. I stood outside his door for a moment, my hand hovering near the handle. Then I turned the knob. The door opened slowly, and a small amount of hallway light spilled into the room. I looked inside. The small amount of light from the hallway spilled across the carpet, creating a narrow path into the darkness of Tate's room. I saw him lying there beneath the blue duvet. He wasn't wearing anything, just resting beneath the covers, his body relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Then his eyes opened. He looked directly at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The expression on Tate's face was completely neutral. There was no anger, no accusation, no relief, nothing I could read. And that somehow made it harder. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what I was supposed to do next. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways on the walk upstairs. I thought maybe he would say something, maybe he would ask why I was there. But Tate didn't. He simply lifted his arm and pulled back the duvet, holding it open. An invitation. Silent. I didn't need him to say the words. I crossed the room quickly, my bare feet making almost no sound against the carpet. The moment I reached the bed, I climbed onto the mattress beside him. Tate pulled the duvet back over me, wrapping me in the warmth his body had left behind. For the first time that night, my body began to relax. The silence between us was still there. The problems were still there. Nothing had been fixed. But for a moment, I wasn't alone. The small amount of light from the hallway spilled across the carpet, creating a narrow path into the darkness of Tate's room. I saw him lying there beneath the blue duvet. He wasn't wearing anything, just resting beneath the covers, his body relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Then his eyes opened. He looked directly at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The expression on Tate's face was completely neutral. There was no anger, no accusation, no relief, nothing I could read. And that somehow made it harder. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what I was supposed to do next. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways on the walk upstairs. I thought maybe he would say something, maybe he would ask why I was there. But Tate didn't. He simply lifted his arm and pulled back the duvet, holding it open. An invitation. Silent. I didn't need him to say the words. I crossed the room quickly, my bare feet making almost no sound against the carpet. The moment I reached the bed, I climbed onto the mattress beside him. Tate pulled the duvet back over me, wrapping me in the warmth his body had left behind. For the first time that night, my body began to relax. The silence between us was still there. The problems were still there. Nothing had been fixed. But for a moment, I wasn't alone. Once Tate had wrapped me in the duvet, shielding me from the cold air of the room, he didn't let go. He gently pushed me onto my back, supporting my head with one hand as he adjusted the pillow beneath me. It was such a familiar gesture, something small and ordinary that somehow carried years of memories. Then Tate settled over me the way he always had. Not with anger. Not with desperation. Just with the quiet familiarity of someone returning to a place he knew by heart. I lay there feeling the weight of him, the warmth of him, and the comfort my body had been searching for all night. But I couldn't tell what it meant. Was this Tate's last moment of nostalgia, a final reminder of all the nights we had spent like this before everything changed? Was he holding on to a memory because he knew he was leaving in the morning? Or was this his way of saying something he couldn't bring himself to say out loud? That he didn't want to go. I stared into the darkness, listening to his breathing, trying to understand him. Because that had always been our problem. We felt everything. We just didn't always know how to say it. I tried to let myself fall asleep. Tate lowered his head, settling into the familiar place near my neck. I could feel his breathing against my skin, slow and steady, and the tension I had been carrying all night began to loosen. It had always calmed me. There was something about the simple presence of him, the warmth, the weight, the quiet reassurance that he was there, that made the world feel less overwhelming. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. Eventually, we both fell asleep wrapped around each other, Tate draped over me the way he had done so many times before, his body resting against mine as if it was the most natural place in the world. We had done this countless times over the years. Thousands of nights spent this way. Not because it was dramatic or exciting, but because we simply liked being near each other. Because sometimes the best part of the day was ending it beside the person who knew you better than anyone else. For that moment there was no argument. No fear about tomorrow. No questions about what would happen next. There was only Tate and me, holding on to something familiar for one more night. Unbeknownst to Tate or me, while we slept peacefully in the early hours of the morning, the world outside our bedroom continued moving. Neither of us knew that while we were wrapped around each other, holding on to a moment we thought belonged only to us, something else was already happening. A few houses down from Noah's Rambler, a car slowly pulled onto the quiet street. The engine went silent. The headlights turned off. For a moment, everything returned to darkness. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always did in the middle of the night, still, empty, and unaware. Porch lights glowed faintly in the distance, and the only sounds were the quiet ones of a sleeping community. Then the car door opened. An unknown figure stepped out. There was no way to tell who they were. The darkness hid every identifying feature. Whether the person was male or female, young or old, was impossible to determine. Only their movements could be seen, careful, deliberate, and controlled. The figure walked toward Noah's house. Their footsteps carried softly across the driveway as they approached the front door of the Rambler. Inside, the house remained completely silent. Upstairs, Tate and I slept, unaware that someone was standing only feet away from where we had spent the night trying to find our way back to each other. The figure reached into their pocket and pulled out a credit card. They slid it between the door and the lock, working carefully. A small movement. A quiet pressure. Then, the lock gave. The door opened. The figure stepped inside. And without making a sound, they entered the home where Tate and I were still asleep. The figure slipped quietly through the front door, easing it shut behind them without so much as a click. For several seconds they stood perfectly still. They listened. The house answered with silence. No footsteps. No voices. No movement from upstairs. Satisfied, the intruder bent down, removed their shoes, and set them neatly beside the front door. Bare feet would be quieter on hardwood and carpet, and whoever they were, they clearly had no intention of waking anyone inside. They began walking through the house with slow, measured steps. Nothing about their movements suggested panic or hesitation. They moved as though they had all the time in the world, pausing occasionally to listen before continuing deeper into the home. When they reached the living room, they stopped. Their attention settled on the couch. The blanket had been folded. The pillow had been returned to its proper place. There was no obvious sign that anyone had slept there only a short time earlier. The figure studied the room for another moment before continuing. Without a sound, they crossed the living room and approached the staircase. They seemed to know exactly which steps to avoid. Carefully placing each foot, they bypassed the loose boards that usually creaked beneath someone's weight. One step after another, they climbed toward the second floor in almost complete silence. At the top of the stairs, they paused again. The hallway was dark. Only a faint glow from the street outside filtered through a distant window, outlining the bedroom doors. The figure walked first toward Noah's room. The bedroom door stood open. Slowly, they leaned forward and looked inside. The room was empty. The bed had not been slept in. The figure lingered for only a second before turning away. Then they walked to Tate's room. Their hand closed around the doorknob. Slowly, carefully, they turned it. The door drifted inward. It opened without a single squeak or creak. The hinges were completely silent. Tate's bedroom was almost completely dark. The blinds were fully closed. The shutters had been latched from the inside, sealing out the moonlight and leaving only the faintest trace of illumination slipping in around the edges of the window frame. For a moment, the figure remained motionless in the doorway, allowing their eyes to adjust to the darkness. Gradually, the room came into focus. The bed, the dresser, the familiar outline of furniture stands quietly in the shadows. And then, the two men are asleep together. Noah lay on his back, nearly hidden beneath the blue duvet that had been pulled up to their shoulders. Tate was draped over him exactly as he had slept thousands of times before, his body resting protectively across Noah's chest, his face nestled into the curve of Noah's neck. Even in sleep, there was something instinctive about the way he held Noah, as though his body had long ago decided there was nowhere else it belonged. Neither of them stirred. Their breathing was slow and even. Whoever had entered the room had done so without waking either man. The figure's gaze lingered. It took in every detail of the room. There was one thing that immediately stood out. Blue. It was everywhere. Tate's favorite color had always been blue, and his bedroom reflected it without apology. The wallpaper was blue. The duvet wrapped around the sleeping pair was blue. Even the shutters covering the windows had been painted blue. The room felt unmistakably like Tate. Comfortable. Orderly. Familiar. The figure looked back at the bed. Tate remained asleep, his arms loosely around Noah, his face resting against Noah's neck as though the events of the previous day had never happened. For one quiet moment, the room was perfectly still. Only the soft rhythm of two sleeping men, completely unaware that someone was standing only a few feet away, watching them in the darkness. The figure remained motionless in the doorway for several long seconds. Nothing moved. The room was filled only with the quiet rhythm of two people sleeping. Slowly the figure stepped inside. The carpet muffled every footstep. There was no creak from the floor, no rustle of clothing, no sound beyond the steady breathing coming from the bed. The stranger approached cautiously, almost respectfully, until they stood beside Tate. For a moment they simply looked at him. Even in the darkness, Tate was unmistakable. His hazel hair spilled across the pillow, his face relaxed in a way it rarely was while he was awake. His arm rested possessively across Noah, his body draped over him as though years of habit had made it impossible to sleep any other way. The figure's breathing slowed. Then almost hesitantly, a hand reached forward. Fingertips brushed against Tate's cheek. The touch was impossibly gentle. There was no hostility. No urgency. It was the kind of caress reserved for someone deeply loved or deeply missed. It lingered for only a few seconds, the thumb barely moving against Tate's skin before the hand slowly withdrew. Tate never stirred. His breathing remained slow and even, his face still nestled comfortably against Noah's neck. The figure's attention shifted. Their hand drifted toward Noah. Slowly, careful not to wake him, gentle fingers slipped into Noah's blonde hair. The soft locks ran between the person's fingers as though they were remembering their texture. One slow stroke. Then another. It was an oddly intimate gesture, filled with tenderness rather than curiosity. Neither man woke. Neither realized someone else's hands had touched them while they slept. The figure lowered their hand once more. For another long moment, they simply stood there watching the two men together. The bedroom was perfectly still. Tate unconsciously tightened his hold around Noah ever so slightly, an instinctive movement made in sleep rather than by thought. Noah didn't react. He remained comfortably beneath him, their breathing gradually falling into the same quiet rhythm. The stranger watched them without interruption. Whatever emotion crossed their face remained hidden by the darkness. Finally they looked away. Near the foot of the bed sat several neatly folded belongings Tate had set aside for the morning. The figure walked over and crouched down. They sorted carefully through the small pile, disturbing as little as possible before selecting a single shirt. Blue. One of Tate's favorites. The fabric was lifted gently, almost reverently, and folded over the person's arm. Only then did they return one final glance toward the bed. The two sleeping men hadn't moved. Satisfied, the figure quietly crossed the room once more. The bedroom door was pulled almost completely shut behind them. Thanks to the freshly oiled hinges, it closed in complete silence. The figure walked back down the hallway and descended the staircase with the same practiced care they had shown coming up. Every step avoided the squeaky boards. Every movement suggested someone determined to leave no trace of their visit. Reaching the dining room, the stranger stopped beside the table. From a pocket they removed a small shooter glass. The tiny glass caught a faint glimmer of light before being placed neatly in the center of the dining room table, almost as though it had been left intentionally for someone to find. The figure stood there for another brief moment, Tate's blue shirt still clutched in one hand. Then they quietly crossed the living room. The front door opened. They stepped outside. Carefully, they pulled the door closed behind them and locked it. The house looked exactly as it had before they arrived. The stranger walked calmly down the driveway and disappeared into the darkness. Several houses away, an old car waited at the curb. The figure climbed inside. The engine started with a low rumble. Without switching on the high beams, the vehicle eased away from the neighborhood and vanished into the sleeping streets. Inside Noah's Rambler, nothing seemed out of place. The house remained silent. Upstairs, Noah and Tate continued sleeping peacefully in each other's arms, completely unaware that a stranger had entered their home, stood beside their bed, touched them with surprising tenderness, taken one of Tate's favorite shirts, and disappeared into the night without leaving a single clue behind. Roughly 20 minutes later, Tate's eyes slowly opened. Something felt wrong. He didn't know what had disturbed his sleep. There had been no loud noise, no nightmare, no obvious reason to wake, but years of instinct had taught him to trust that uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. He lay still for a moment. Noah was still beneath him, asleep, his breathing slow and peaceful. The room was silent. Tate frowned. He realized why he had awakened. He was cold. Sometime during the night, the warmth trapped beneath the duvet had escaped and the cool air in the room had settled over his bare shoulders. Reluctantly, he slid off Noah, careful not to wake him. Noah murmured softly in his sleep, but didn't open his eyes. Tate quietly climbed out of bed. He intended to grab another blanket from the chair in the corner of the room. But before he had taken more than a couple of steps, he stopped. His head tilted slightly. His nose twitched. There was a smell. Faint. Almost imperceptible. Tate stood perfectly still, drawing another slow breath through his nose. It wasn't Noah. It wasn't the fresh scent of laundry from the duvet. It wasn't the cedar of the dresser, the old wood of the house, or any of the familiar smells that belonged in the room. This was different. It smelled like cologne. Or perhaps perfume. Tate couldn't immediately tell which. The fragrance was subtle, already beginning to fade, but one thing was certain. It hadn't been there when he had gone to sleep. His expression changed. Every muscle in his body became alert. Tate slowly looked around the room without moving his feet. The scent didn't belong. Whatever it was, it had no business being inside that house. Tate moved silently to the side of the bed. His eyes never left the bedroom door. Without making a sound, he reached beneath the mattress, feeling along the frame until his fingers found what they were looking for. He pulled out a loaded handgun. He had hidden it there years ago as an emergency precaution in case someone ever broke into the house while they were asleep. It had become part of a routine he hoped he would never have to rely on. Tonight he did. The pistol was ready. Tate wrapped his fingers around the grip and listened. Nothing. Only silence. That frightened him more than noise would have. Keeping one eye on the doorway, he reached into the nightstand, retrieved a small key and quietly unlocked his bedroom door. Before stepping into the hallway, he glanced back at Noah. Still asleep. Completely unaware. Tate slipped into the hallway, then quietly locked the bedroom door behind him, leaving Noah safely inside. If someone was in the house, the last thing Tate wanted was for Noah to wander into danger. His heart pounded as he started down the staircase. Every instinct he possessed screamed that something was wrong. The unfamiliar scent still lingered in the air. Cologne. Or perfume. It drifted faintly through the hallway, just enough for Tate to catch it again. Someone else had been here. Someone who did not belong. At the bottom of the stairs, Tate swept the living room with his eyes, the handgun held low but ready. Nothing moved. The couch sat exactly where it always had. The blanket had been folded. The pillow rested neatly in place. His gaze shifted to the front door. It was closed. Locked. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No damaged frame. Yet the unfamiliar fragrance remained, unmistakable against the familiar smells of the house. Then something else caught his attention. On the dining room table sat a single shooter glass. Tate froze. His pulse quickened. Hours earlier, before going to bed, he had looked directly at that table. It had been empty. Now the tiny glass sat squarely in the middle of it. Tate stared at it, his mind racing. It wasn't theirs. Neither he nor Noah owned a shooter glass. Neither of them drank alcohol, and there was no reason for one to be in the house. Someone had entered while they slept. Someone had walked through their home. And whoever it was had left something behind. Only one thought flashed through Tate's mind. Noah. Everything else disappeared. The strange scent. The shooter glass. The possibility that someone had been inside the house. None of it mattered as much as one terrifying question. What if they had hurt Noah? Tate spun around and sprinted back up the stairs, taking them two at a time. His hands shook as he fumbled for the small key. He jammed it into the bedroom lock, turned it, threw the door open, then immediately shut and locked it behind him. His eyes darted wildly around the room. Nothing looked out of place. No movement. No sound. He rushed to the bed and dropped to his knees beside Noah. Tate, Noah murmured sleepily, barely stirring. Tate didn't answer. He leaned over and pressed his ear against Noah's bare chest. For one agonizing second he listened. Then, thump, thump, thump. Noah's heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Tate closed his eyes in relief as his own lungs finally drew a full breath. He hadn't even realized he'd been holding it. Noah was alive. He was unharmed. Only then did Tate realize what he had done. In his panic, he had rushed straight back into the bedroom, locked the door behind him, and focused only on Noah. He hadn't checked the closet. He hadn't looked behind the curtains. He hadn't even looked under the bed. If there really had been a burglar inside the room. Tate had just locked both himself and Noah in with them. Tate remained frozen beside the bed for several long seconds, forcing himself to think instead of panic. His pulse was still racing. He had reacted on instinct, and instinct had nearly made him careless. Slowly, he reached into the top drawer of the nightstand and retrieved a small penlight. It was just bright enough to illuminate the room without flooding it with light. The last thing he wanted was to wake Noah. Keeping one hand on the pistol and the other on the flashlight, Tate switched it on. A narrow beam cut through the darkness. He crouched and swept the light beneath the bed. Nothing. Only dust, a few storage boxes, and an empty floor. He stood and crossed to the closet. His breathing was shallow as he slowly pulled the door open. The flashlight moved from left to right. Clothes. Shoes. Shelves. No one. He turned toward the windows. The heavy blue drapes hung perfectly still. Tate walked over, pulled one aside with the barrel of the handgun, then checked behind the other. Empty. Only after searching every corner of the bedroom did he finally lower the flashlight. The room was secure. Tate let out a slow breath, but the feeling in his stomach refused to leave. He replayed the last few minutes in his head. He had never been that careless before. Never. Every night, without exception, he locked his bedroom door before going to sleep. It was simply a habit, one born from years of wanting to know Noah was safe whenever they slept under the same roof. Tonight had been the one exception. Tonight, he had intentionally left it unlocked. Not because he had forgotten. Because he had hoped. Hoped Noah might change his mind. Hoped he would leave the couch behind, quietly turn the doorknob and climb into bed beside him the way he always used to. Tate had wanted Noah to know he was welcome without having to ask. The thought made his chest tighten. If someone really had entered the house while they slept, then Tate's hope had unintentionally left them vulnerable. He switched off the flashlight. The room fell back into darkness. Setting the pistol within arm's reach on the nightstand, Tate quietly slipped beneath the duvet once more. Without hesitation, he wrapped himself completely around Noah. His chest covered Noah's. His arms enclosed him. His legs settled protectively around Noah's. He lowered his head beside Noah's neck and listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing. It wasn't for comfort anymore. It was protection. If the intruder was still somewhere inside the house, if they somehow made it into this room, then they would have to get through Tate first. He couldn't stop a bullet. He couldn't promise he would win a fight. But he could make one silent vow. No one was getting to Noah without going through him. Tate's eyes opened with a start. For one terrifying second, he couldn't remember where he was. Then everything from the night before came rushing back. The strange scent. The shooter glass. The possibility that someone had been inside the house. His eyes immediately dropped to the place beside him. Empty. The warmth beside him had already begun to fade. Noah. Tate sat upright so quickly the duvet slid into his lap. His eyes swept across the bedroom. The bed. The chair. The windows. Then they stopped at the bedroom door. It stood open. Tate frowned. He distinctly remembered locking it after returning to bed. Had Noah unlocked it? Or... He forced the thought from his mind before panic could take over again. Throwing the covers aside, Tate grabbed the first pair of pants he could find and hurried into them. He didn't bother with a shirt or shoes. His heart was already beginning to pound as he stepped into the hallway. Noah, he called softly. No answer. He moved quickly down the hall, checking Noah's bedroom first. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. His pace quickened as he reached the staircase. Every possibility raced through his mind. Had Noah gone downstairs? Had he found the shooter glass? Had someone come back? Tate descended the stairs 2 at a time. Then he stopped. From the kitchen came a familiar sound. The gentle whistle of a kettle settling after it had boiled. The quiet clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug. Someone was making tea. Tate closed his eyes for a brief moment. Relief washed over him. Following the sounds, he walked toward the kitchen, where the aroma of freshly brewed tea drifted through the air. Noah was already awake. Tate walked up behind Noah and wrapped his arms around him. Noah was standing at the kitchen sink, focused on making tea, and the sudden feeling of Tate's arms around him made him jump. Jesus, Tate, Noah said, placing a hand over his chest, you scared me to death. Tate laughed, the sound soft and familiar. Did you think I was Michael Myers? Tate asked with a smirk. Noah looked over his shoulder at him. Considering everything that's happened in the last 12 hours, maybe don't sneak up on me before sunrise. Tate's smile widened slightly. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Tate just held him there, his chin resting near Noah's shoulder, as if reassuring himself that Noah was actually there. Noah noticed. He didn't comment on it. Instead, he looked down at the second mug sitting on the counter. Do you want a cup of tea? Noah asked. Tate looked at the mug, then back at Noah. Yeah, he said quietly, I do. And for a brief moment, standing together in the kitchen as the morning light began to enter the house, they were not two people trying to figure out how to say goodbye. They were just Tate and Noah. Are you trying a new cologne? Noah asked casually. Tate looked up from his tea. Noah leaned against the counter, studying him with a small smile. I smelled it in the kitchen earlier, Noah continued. It's nice. For a few seconds Tate stopped breathing. It was barely noticeable, but Noah knew him too well. He saw the hesitation, the tiny pause before Tate answered. Yeah, Tate said. A lie. A small one. I thought I would try something new. Noah's smile faded slightly in a teasing tone. Don't lie, Tate. Tate looked at him. Noah shook his head gently. That's not a new smell. The room became quieter. I've smelled it on you your entire life. Tate's expression changed. For a moment he looked almost caught. Almost guilty. It was supposed to be a surprise, Tate quickly interrupted. Noah stared at him. A surprise. Tate looked away, taking a sip of his tea as if the answer was obvious. Yeah. But Noah knew Tate. He knew when Tate was avoiding a question. And he knew when there was something he wasn't saying. The scent in the house suddenly felt different. It wasn't just unfamiliar anymore. It was familiar in a way Noah couldn't explain. It was a parting gift, Tate said. Noah's expression changed slightly. Tate looked down at his tea, then back at him. I put it in your room on your bedspread. For a moment, Noah didn't say anything. It's a bottle of Aramis by Estee Lauder, Tate continued. The one from 1966, it's the scent I wear. Noah looked at him surprised. Tate gave a small shrug, trying to make it sound casual. I tried it on myself first just to make sure it wasn't too strong. I didn't want you breaking out in hives or anything. That earned the smallest smile from Noah. Even now, Tate was still thinking about details like that. I've been using it my entire life, Tate lied quietly. I just didn't want you to know until you saw the gift. Noah studied him. The smell. Tate nodded. Yeah. A silence settled between them. Noah finally understood why it had felt so familiar. It wasn't some new cologne Tate had suddenly decided to wear. It was something that had always been part of him. A scent tied to memories. To Tate. To all the years Noah had spent knowing him. You were going to leave that for me? Noah asked. Tate looked away. Yeah. The answer was simple. But Noah heard everything Tate didn't say. It wasn't just a bottle of cologne. It was Tate leaving behind something that smelled like him. I've been wearing it my whole life, Tate said. He leaned against the counter, trying to make the moment sound lighter than it was. And I hate that cheap-ass cologne you wear from whatever bargain basement you shop at. Tate laughed. Noah immediately rolled his eyes. Of course you do. I'm serious, Tate said, the corner of his mouth lifting. I thought you deserved something decent, something that when you're around rich guys they won't immediately assume you're cheap because of your cologne choices. Noah stared at him. Then he blushed. Right, Noah said quietly. Tate smiled. I've been wearing it since I was old enough to shower. And if you don't like the scent, you don't have to wear it. The teasing faded. Tate looked down at the floor. The change was subtle, but no one noticed. I lied, Tate admitted. Noah's expression softened. I lied because I didn't want you to know I had gotten it for you. Tate rubbed the side of his mug with his thumb. It was supposed to be a surprise. He paused. And now I ruined it. For a moment, Tate didn't look like the confident, stubborn person who always had something to say. He just looked disappointed. Then his eyes slowly lifted from the floor. They met Noah's. Noah was smiling. Not a big smile. Not one that erased everything between them. Just a real one. A familiar one. I wonder what you were doing in my room for 3 minutes last night, Noah said. Tate froze. The smallest flicker of panic crossed his face. No one noticed. Of course he noticed. After all these years, Tate still wasn't very good at hiding things from him. You know what? Tate said suddenly, his voice shifting as if he had decided to retreat from the moment. Now it feels kind of weird. Noah looked at him. The cologne, Tate added quickly, I just forgot about it. A faint awkward laugh escaped him. Honestly, it kind of sounds a little too sappy and stupidly sentimental. I've made everything weird and awkward now that I'm thinking about it. He immediately regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth. I'll just go upstairs and get rid of it. Before Noah could respond, Tate turned and walked quickly upstairs. He disappeared into Noah's room and closed the door. The problem wasn't that Tate wanted Noah to have a bottle of the cologne. The problem was that Tate didn't actually have a bottle to give him. It had never been about the cologne itself. Tate had told Noah that he was going to give him cologne to cover up that an intruder had been in their house, not that he actually wanted to give Noah a bottle of cologne. The problem was that Tate didn't have that brand or year of cologne anywhere around here. Noah was downstairs making another cup of tea for himself, while Tate hoped that Noah would buy the story about the cologne. Downstairs, Noah heard Tate moving around in his room. His heart sank. He's taking it back. Noah stared toward the staircase. Shit. He hadn't meant to embarrass Tate, he hadn't meant to make him feel foolish for caring, but now Tate was upstairs undoing the one small gesture he had tried to make. Noah knew Tate well enough to understand what was happening. Tate wasn't taking back a bottle of cologne. It was about what it represented, a small piece of himself, a memory, something personal that belonged only to them. He was taking back the vulnerability that came with it. Tate came back downstairs a few minutes later, his expression carefully controlled, as if he had already decided what he was going to do next. A guy should be coming by in a few minutes to do some work on the front door, Tate said. Noah looked at him. Since I'm not going to be living here anymore. The words landed heavier than Tate seemed to intend. I got you a security system, Tate continued, avoiding Noah's eyes. This isn't exactly the safest neighborhood on this side of town, and you living here alone would make you an easy target for a burglary. Noah opened his mouth to respond, but Tate kept going. So I'm having a professional install an anti-theft system on the property. If someone tries to break into your home, an alarm will go off immediately. He gestured toward the house. I'm putting sensors on all the doors and windows, everything will be covered. Tate paused, his voice softening. That way, Talia won't worry every night when I'm not here. Noah looked at him, noticing the contradiction. Tate was talking like he was leaving forever, but every decision he was making was still centered around taking care of him. You're leaving, Noah said quietly, but you're still making sure I'm protected. Tate looked away. That's what I do. No, Noah said, that's who you are. Tate didn't answer. He just stood there, carrying out the last pieces of responsibility he could think of, making sure Noah was safe, even if he was convinced he no longer had a place beside him. Talia would kill me, Tate said with a small, tired smile, if I left you exposed and vulnerable to the elements. Noah looked at him. She really would, Tate continued. She'd probably beat my ass for walking away and not making sure you were taken care of. The attempt at humor faded quickly. Now that I'm not going to be living here anymore, I won't be handling a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. Noah's expression changed slightly at the way Tate said it, like he was already dividing their lives into before and after. The little things, Tate explained, the things you probably don't even notice, calling people when something breaks, making sure things get repaired, keeping track of things around the house. He paused. If you have questions about something and you don't know what to do, you can always call Andrew. Noah looked at him. Andrew. Yeah, Tate said, he lives 2 blocks over, he can help you if something comes up. Noah was quiet for a moment. You already planned all of this. Tate looked away. I had to. No, Tate, Noah said softly, you wanted to. Tate didn't respond. Because Noah was right. Even while convincing himself he was leaving, Tate had spent his time making sure Noah would still be cared for after he was gone. Tate looked resigned, the fight seemingly gone out of him. I'd better go upstairs, he said quietly, pick up the bags I'm taking with me. Noah stared at him. That way I'm out of your hair before the guy comes. The word stung more than Tate probably intended. The guy is coming from ADT, Tate added, almost like he was reminding himself there was still something practical to handle, something he could control. Noah opened his mouth but nothing came out. He watched Tate turn away and walk toward the stairs. Every movement felt strangely final. Tate wasn't storming out, he wasn't angry, he wasn't making a scene. He was simply leaving. That almost hurt more. Tate. But Tate didn't stop. He went upstairs, leaving Noah standing alone in the room. Noah remained silent, staring at the staircase where Tate had disappeared. He didn't know what to say. How was he supposed to respond to someone who was walking away while still making sure every light bulb, every lock, every possible danger was taken care of? Tate was leaving as if he had already accepted that he was no longer wanted. And Noah was left speechless, not because he didn't have anything to say, but because he suddenly realized how deeply Tate believed it. Well, goodbye, Tate said quietly. He tried to step around Noah, keeping his voice casual, like this was just another thing he had to handle. But Noah moved with him, blocking the exit. Tate stopped. For a moment he just stared at him, confused. Noah. He tried to move around him again, taking a small step to the side. Again Noah shifted and blocked his path. Tate blinked. He wasn't sure what was happening. Was Noah playing some kind of game? Was he trying to make him laugh? Was he just delaying the inevitable because he didn't know how to say goodbye? Tate decided maybe Noah wanted a goodbye hug. That made sense. A final moment, a way to end things without anger. Okay, Tate muttered. He quickly wrapped his arms around Noah, giving him a brief hug, the kind someone gives when they're trying not to let the moment become too emotional. There, Tate said softly, goodbye. He released him and immediately tried to sidestep again. But this time, Noah didn't move out of the way. Instead, Noah wrapped his arms around Tate and held him firmly. Tate froze. For a second, he didn't understand. Noah. He tried to shift, but Noah didn't let go. Tate looked down at him, his hands still hanging at his sides, the bags forgotten. He couldn't move. The strange thing was that Noah wasn't holding him back like someone trying to win an argument. He was holding him like someone afraid that if he let go, Tate would disappear. Tate, Noah said quietly. Tate swallowed. You know I actually have to leave, right? But there was no anger in his voice anymore. Just confusion. Because Tate had spent all morning convincing himself that Noah wanted distance. And yet here Noah was, standing in the doorway, refusing to let him walk away. No, Noah said. Tate looked up confused. No. No, Noah repeated, holding on to him, you don't have to go. Tate stared at him, almost like he couldn't process the words. Noah shook his head. You did all that talking last night, you built this entire argument about why you have to leave. You made a whole case for why walking away is the right thing to do. His expression softened, but his voice remained firm. But you never once asked me what I wanted. Tate opened his mouth, but Noah continued. You just decided for both of us, you played the martyr, you made yourself the person who has to sacrifice everything because apparently you know what's best for me. Tate looked down. Noah. No, Noah tightened his arms slightly, I'm not finished. He took a breath. I'm a grown man, Tate. I don't need you to protect me from every possible disappointment. I don't need you to build the perfect life you think I should have and then disappear because you decided you aren't part of it. Tate was quiet. If I wanted a different life, Noah said, I would have chosen a different life. He paused, then dramatically shifted his posture. Honestly, this is exactly what you do. Noah stomped his foot, deliberately mimicking Tate's earlier dramatic moments. You decide everything, you announce the tragedy, you pack your bags, you walk away before anyone can tell you you're wrong. For a second Tate just stared. Then unexpectedly he laughed. A real laugh. Not the bitter, sarcastic laugh he had been using all morning. Noah looked pleased.